Welcome to Dental All Stars. I'm Alex Nottingham, founder and CEO of All Star Dental Academy. And with me is Dr. Peter Strong, mindfulness therapist and speaker. And we're talking about liberation from stress. Please welcome Dr. Peter Strong.
Greetings.
Greetings. Great to have you. So tell me a little bit about your background, Dr. Strong. How did you end up in mindfulness?
Well, that's a long story, but
The short version, yeah.
it's something that has really developed as a theme in my life from very early times. Certainly when I was in college, in university, I became very interested in meditation. And also with things like positive thinking and how we can actually take charge of our emotional and psychological well-being. My father was also very interested in this, so this is something we shared together.
Oh, your father was interested in this as well.
Oh,
Okay.
he was. This is long before
It was
the term
popular.
mindfulness was
Yeah.
ever mentioned, but and we're all in the field of education. I was a teacher, school teacher for many years, as well as a research scientist. So I've had quite a diverse background, but underneath there was always this interest in mindfulness and its applications. And basically, when we came back to America, about 20 years ago now, I suppose, then I left the science field and sort of started to concentrate more and more on developing mindfulness, and I wrote a book on it, The Path of Mindfulness Meditation, and started to develop a mindfulness therapy practice, which I offer online via Skype.
And very good at it. I must say, right from the beginning, I had the pleasure of working with you for, like half a year or at least a year, and Heather as well. Learned, I call it the Strong method. You don't call it that, but I wrote my notes. But it's very helpful. I like how you really. So we heard about mindfulness and meditation, and you really cut through a lot of the dogma and get right to, okay, how does this work therapeutically to work with your emotions for a particular result? Tell me, so our subject is stress, and we'll get into some of the prerequisites of whatever as we go along, but and how we liberate ourselves, how we free ourselves from stress. What is stress? How would you define stress?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, it's a broad subject, but I think we're talking primarily about chronic stress. That is the kind of underlying uneasiness, anxiety that doesn't go away. We wake up with it in the morning. It plagues us through the day, makes it difficult to sleep at night, and so on. So this chronic stress, that's what we're really talking about. And I would define stress primarily as a condition where there's a loss of relationship with our conditioned thoughts, our habitual conditioned thoughts. This is a theme that we work on very much in mindfulness therapy and mindfulness training in general. Stress is not created by difficult life conditions, external conditions. It's not even created by thoughts either, which is fairly revolutionary and differs a lot from other mindfulness teachings out there. These are triggers for stress, but not the cause. The cause of stress and anxiety and depression, for that matter, lies in the way we relate to these mental experiences that arise, that are triggered. So typically we may experience difficulty at work. We maybe get criticized or fail to meet a deadline. That's a trigger. That is not a cause. How people respond to those kind of triggers varies a great deal from person to person, and also in your own individual life from day to day. It can depend on many different factors. So it's subjective. Stress is a subjective reaction, and it's conditioned, which means that it becomes a habit. When those triggers get triggered, the mind just kicks into a conditioned habit that it's learned. And that's another way of thinking about stress. Stress is something that's learned. We're not born with it. It's not inevitable. It's something we learn, usually unconsciously, without real choice or awareness of what's happening. It becomes habitual, a conditioned habit. And, that's what we really address with mindfulness training, to start to overcome this blind, habitual conditioning.
That makes total sense. Yeah, I was talking to Heather about that earlier, is just observing stuff that you taught about and questioning, right? Is there's this primary pain that occurs in the body and the mind, and that's not, as you would probably say, it's not a problem. That's there. And there are ways of working with that. But our reaction to it, our resistance to it, that's where we start to get into suffering in situations. And then I like what you're saying. It's habitual. It's really become so. Anxiety, for example, which I know you're a specialist on, is it's a continual behavioral loop that just you had a fear or something, and then there was this reaction, and then that reaction continues to perpetuate. The fear wasn't the problem. It's the reaction that continues to perpetuate. And it's finding a way to be able to disarm it. So you're saying that, so stress is, and this kind of stress, as you probably know, like body, it depends on you to define stress, right? The body will have stress. You need stress to build muscles. You need, I guess they call this positive stress, eustress. I guess that's how we define it. But what we're talking about in this liberation of stress is that ongoing habitual stress that keeps happening. It doesn't arise and fall. It becomes ongoing. And then as the thinking mind continues to create stories and problems and situations, just to kind of put myself in, and you said, oh, we should use you as an example at times. But I was talking to you the other day in our audio test, and I was trying to get advice from you. I said, Dr. Strong, you're so wise. You're very wise. I call nickname for everybody listening is Dr. Peter Strong is Obi-Wan. I think he prefers Dr. Strong, but I go with Obi-Wan, the wisdom. And I'm like, give me the answer. How do I handle the situation? And you didn't take the bait. You're like, no, Alex, where are you suffering? That's where you have to go in that respect without feeling guilty. That's the primary focus. So, okay, I understand stress is ongoing, stress is habitual. How do we start to detach from that? How do we, okay, so just give me an example. Our followers are mostly entrepreneurs, dentists, and those that work in the dental field as well, assistants and front office. And like I said, we have a pretty broad following, even beyond dentistry, but professionals that are working every day, and they have lives, and they have office situations. They're dealing with patients that are sometimes scared, and they have their own. So it's this compounding of stress. And then you have the world stress, political stress, all the stuff that goes on. And then they're kind of being attached almost like it's getting sticky. So how does one start to untangle from all of that
Mhm.
and be, I guess our goal is to be more happy and free.
Yeah, and that's the most important. That's really the purpose of this work. Um, so the first thing I think to understand is that as we said, stress is subjective. It does not exist out there. We create our stress. We do so blindly, without conscious awareness. So mindfulness is all about developing conscious awareness. So the first step is to, if we're really looking at practical details, first step is to write down all of your triggers, is to get to know your triggers that trigger those habitual conditioned reactions. Then we want to actually start training with those triggers and the reactions that get triggered habitually. And that is the subject of meditation. For me, meditation is sometimes or frequently looked at as some form of escape from the mind, escape from stress, escape from thoughts. And I took, I challenged them. I felt that that was not very meaningful. So for me, meditation, mindfulness meditation, is about meditating on the mind. It's about meditating on those thoughts, those emotional reactions, those triggers, so that we start to change our relationship to those habits. Because as long as the habits remain unconscious and just continually operating blindly like a machine, we simply continue to suffer. And if what often happens, as you indicated, is we start reacting to the stress itself. So we react with avoidance and dislike and criticism. I'm not good enough. I shouldn't be stressed. I should be able to handle this, and so on and so forth. And again, we fall into those reactions, those secondary reactions, blindly, without any choice or questioning at all. So that's how stress works. It feeds on itself and it proliferates itself through reactivity. And it's learning to see these reactions very clearly without adding to them is the heart of the practice. So we learn to meditate on our stress. We don't meditate on the breath, as is often taught. That's an avoidance of the problem. That simply will feed the stress. It makes you feel good for, a short period of time, like any distraction will do. But it leaves those habits intact, which means you're vulnerable. And mindfulness practice, mindfulness training is about overcoming vulnerabilities to stress, anxiety, and depression. It's about freeing, liberating. It doesn't actually matter if there are thoughts there. That's just a natural part of the flow of consciousness. That's how the mind works. It creates thoughts. That's not the problem. It's our relationship to those thoughts and emotions. That's where the problem is. So to change this, we train with those thoughts and emotional reactions by deliberately bringing them into the mind, deliberately meditating on that stressful conversation at work or that failure to meet a deadline. We meditate on that to find these habitual reactions and develop mindfulness of those reactions. if this is making sense, I will continue in a minute, but if you have any questions on that,
No, it
just
makes total
clarify
sense.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm also we're streaming live, so as questions come up, I can interject as we go along. So, all right. So, like you said earlier, you and some may not be familiar with this, but in meditation, one method is to meditate on the breath, or to have some sort of mantra, or and so on. And you're saying that that's a potential distracting mechanism, or there's obvious distractions beyond just meditation. I notice a lot that when I'm bored or um, stressed, I might just go on the phone, just go through YouTube or social media or something, just to kind of keep and I'm like, I'm watching, oh, my mind, I'm doing something to kind of distract. So let's use that as an example, simple example. So I'm feeling bored or agitated, and what do I want to do? So I go to social media, or I go and I start doing or working or something distracting. That would not be mindful, right? That's a way of distracting.
No, that's right. That is falling into the trap of reactivity. In that case, we would classify that as, behavioral reactivity.
Behavioral reactivity.
I'm
And
trying to escape the cause of my suffering by finding another activity that takes my mind off the condition. Eating disorders are based
sure,
very much on the same avoidance strategy. We try to find comfort in food to,
right.
to, to counteract the suffering that we're feeling. Addictions, quite frankly, are based on this avoidance strategy. So avoidance is one form of reactivity. In Buddhist psychology, we call it aversion or hatred. One of the three primary types of reaction. The other is grasping. I want to find something nice to take my mind off things. Or going to seminars on how to make myself better.
Happier.
It's a big industry. And the third type of reaction that is really the root of everything is this blind identification with those reactions, those thought reactions, those emotion reactions. Statements like, I am bored, I am irritated, I am angry. We just blindly accept it, we identify with that reaction. What we're trying to do with mindfulness is to turn those reactions into objects, which is what they actually are in the first place, mental objects that arise in the mind. So one very simple, if you like, psychological practice that really can help start this process of breaking free from stress is just to see the emotion. Instead of saying, I am irritated, say, I notice irritation arising in my mind. I notice anger in my mind.
Because you're not
I
merging with
notice
it.
sadness.
Mm-hmm.
So I am not identifying with it, but I'm seeing it as a mental object that has gotten triggered in the mind. But I am no longer identified with it. I am now the observer, the one who sees this emotion, this thought, this stress, this irritation, this anger. I become the observer. And that, in mindfulness therapy, as I teach it, is referred to as your true self, the one that is the observer, not the observed. You are not the content of your mind. This is the big delusion that we fall into, the trap of identification. We think we are our thoughts. We think we are our emotions, our memories, our beliefs, whatever arises in the mind. But that's not who we are. We are actually something much bigger than that. The observer. You think about it. I can be angry, and with a little bit of training, I can say, oh, there's anger. I see it in me. Who is it that sees the anger?
Mm.
You see, that's the question to really contemplate. And that starts to point at your true self. You are not the anger. You are the consciousness that sees the anger. And again, in Buddhist psychology, this is referred to as your original mind or your Buddha mind. That is really what Buddha means. It means the one who is awakened. Awakened to what? Awakened to those content reactions that arise in the mind. So if you like, you're independent of those thoughts. You're developing independence. But this only makes sense when you start to train in it. You can't just apply this as a nice concept or belief. That just becomes another problem. So that's why if there's stress, we meditate on the stress. If there's anxiety, we meditate on the anxiety. If there's anger, we meditate on that conversation we had earlier in the day.
So when you say meditate, because I know you define it very differently, what's happening? So you're not focusing on the breath. How would you define meditation, and what is the process? So here's anxiety, here's stress, here's boredom, here's something arising. We say, I'm noticing something in me, or I'm noticing anxiety, or I'm noticing boredom, or I'm noticing stress. Now we, meditate. What's happening? What is meditation in your mind? And
meditation is building that new relationship or that healthy relationship with the mind. So we can't just have it be a 1 second event and then we go back to something else. We have to train with those thoughts so that you can train to be your true self in a relationship with those thoughts, emotions.
So it's mental training, meditation,
It
essentially.
is mental training.
And how do you avoid, so what if the feelings are really strong? Like, I think that's where, obviously it's easier if, to be with things that are uncomfortable when it's lighter dose or you're in a better state. But how do you avoid falling into the stress? So here's the stress. Here I am. Ooh, it's big. Do you recommend like just touching in, then go back to your boredom, distracting, come back? Like, is it kind of like you're building your tolerance? Like, so what do you recommend?
Right. So the first thing to get clear is if the suffering is strong, the emotional reactions, stress, anxiety, then my path is to meditate more, not less.
Oh,
so
really?
I really, really get stuck into proper meditation. But you do it in a balanced way, yes. A very good approach to meditation might be 5 minutes on, 5 minutes off. 5 minutes meditating on that stressful
I see.
conversation or that emotion that got triggered or that argument that happened. But we're now doing it deliberately, consciously. It's now coming from our true self instead of us just being a victim of habit. We're now making a conscious choice, and that is very much a part of mindfulness training and meditation. It's consciously choosing to sit with those painful emotions, because at the end of the day, that is the only thing that will change those painful emotions. A very good analogy always with this work is to think of those painful emotions as being like a child, right? And you, as your true self, is like a parent. The most important thing that a child needs is for you to be present with it when it's suffering, not to try and talk it out of its suffering and telling it has nothing to be afraid of, it's all irrational or whatever. Rational, irrational is completely meaningless. It's of no value. It is there. That is of value. There is suffering in the child. It needs to be acknowledged with an open mind. And that is mindfulness at work. That's what we're bringing to our own minds, where it's most needed. Our own inner pain. We treat it like we would a child. And the beauty is we already know how to do that. That inner wisdom, that innate wisdom, as we call it, is already within us. You don't have to learn it. You already know how to comfort a child, how to comfort a pet that's afraid of the lightning, or whatever it might be. You know. So we bring that quality of kindness, of compassion, friendliness, and openness to our emotions. And that really sets the right conditions for healing.
So instead of looking outside of us from other people or other things or distractions, it's step one, recognizing, okay, there's something arising within me. It's not who I am. It's an emotion. Or it's a pain or whatever, and it's developing. And the reason why it's important, what I'm hearing you say, is it's got to be an object that I can relate to. If it is me, I can't relate to it. I've merged with it. So once I can separate myself with it, and then, like you're saying, it's built into our system to be, I think once I took in my notes years ago with you, it says you can be a grandmother, or parent of loving. I see my wife, and whenever my son, like she'll say, I don't want to deal with other people's kids. But once Zachary's, our son, is in pain, she goes to him naturally. She could be, and this is what's so cool, she could be in a terrible mood, right? But once they're suffering, light goes on, take care of the baby, the child, and so it's within us. Which also is another point, that sometimes we can have both things arise, happiness and sadness, all there too. Hello. And so we go to the suffering, which is innate with us, to be able to care for others. And we do that for ourselves, for those objects that arise in our awareness, to be able to untangle. So what I like, what you teach, is that we are going, because often, and look, we are a personal development company. We business development as well. And there's some, what our coaches would call coaching hacks, that can help you in the moment. There's emotional intelligence. There are certainly things that can help you on the surface to problem solve quickly, but they will keep coming up until you get to the root. It's almost, I know you're a pretty good gardener. I'm not. That's why I have artificial turf. But if you're taking a weed out and you just take the top of it, looks good, it's going to grow back. You got to get to the root. And so what you're talking about, we have to get to the root of the stress, of the suffering. And that is unblend from it, be able to build a relationship with it. And I love a line you taught before where you said, and this is pretty radical, people say, let go, just let go, just let go. And you say, correct me if I'm wrong, you say, you cannot let go of your emotions. They have to let go of you.
Right.
So tell me about that. That's pretty radical.
It is radical. We hear this all the time. Oh, just, let go of your thoughts and focus on being in the present. Very puzzling statement to me as a scientist, because those thoughts are occurring in the present. So much of mindfulness I see is actually just teaching a kind of aversion or a judgmental mind, and saying this is good experience and that's a bad experience, and that is the ultimate opposite of what mindfulness is. I think mindfulness is about developing a relationship to experience. Good, bad, doesn't matter. Whatever is there. So trying to let go of negative reactions, anger, fear, is really just another form of reactivity. It's a form of aversion. The three kinds of reactivity. Aversion is the strongest. Grasping is the second, and identification, third. So we don't try to let go, but rather we try to learn how to be present with it without reacting further. And that is what we find, and you can verify this for yourself, and by doing some practice, is what actually leads to healing. With the example of the child again, or the frightened dog or whatever,
Yeah.
you don't have to come up with solutions, right? You just have to be present. You have to be really present in a friendly, open, non-threatening way. And the fear resolves itself. The fear needs to feel the presence of the parent for the child to overcome its fear, for that fear to let go, if you like, of the child. And it's the same with us. We need to develop this strong relationship between your true self, which is like the parent, and the fear or stress or anxiety that has arisen in you. Think of it like a visitor that's come to you for healing. It's a different way of looking at stress and suffering. It's not bad. It's come to you for healing. It cannot heal itself. It's a conditioned reaction. It's not able to heal itself. It can only heal through the strength of the relationship that's formed between what we also often refer to as your little self, with thoughts, emotions, and other reactions, and your true self, your observer consciousness, that ability that to be present, to hold that emotion within that space of consciousness, is often referred to as a therapeutic space. The healing happens in that space of conscious, mindful relationship.
Now, I will say that uh, as a lawyer, MBA, all these great things, I've developed we can call it the left brain quite well, right? The rational side of and so on. And there's some wonderful, brilliant thinking and brilliant ideas. But when it comes to this realm of emotions, I find them, um, they give some guidance, but it's not that where the ultimate healing happens. And that's what we're talking about. Liberation from stress. It isn't an idea. It isn't a script. It isn't a prayer. It isn't a meditation. It is, from what I'm hearing you, and I found this to be true in my own practice, it is being able to create a relationship with your emotions, and the stronger your degree of presence, of loving kindness with yourself, with this, and I mentioned Sandy. I'm interviewing you today, and she was excited. She looks forward to watching. She's a focusing instructor that you work with at times. And I know focusing is a whole nother model, or we weave in, but it's this concept of it can be this way as long as it needs to be. That's presence. I'm with it as long as it needs to be, because really, like you said, it's going to let go when it wants to let go. We are so like results driven. It has to happen now. I need this now. I need transformation now. I need that. And it doesn't work that way. It's when you build a relationship like a little child, you're going to force it, get better. Darn it. No, it's when the kid, when it's ready in its own wisdom, it will heal. And another thing that you teach that I love is that all of your processes, your whole being is geared towards healing. It's that we get in the way.
And that's a very important concept that's not emphasized enough. Yeah, we have this sort of illusion that we have to fix everything. And but actually, when you look at reality, you'll see that everything that arises in the mind changes. Okay, that's the primary teaching in Buddhism, so-called impermanence. But it's much more than that. When you look very closely, you'll see that everything that arises changes, yes, but in a direction of healing. It's always moving back to a baseline, a place of stability, of balance, of equilibrium. Change is not a random process. It's a very intelligent process. That is part of the inner wisdom of the mind as it is in the body. When you injure a part of the body, cut yourself or whatever it might be, what happens? Immediately the body sets a series of changes in motion that leads to healing, not the other way. It is about, so this is the intelligence of the body, and the same intelligence also exists in the mind when it's free to operate. And that's the kind of law, if you like. When you're not reacting, you are giving things the freedom to operate, to change and heal. It's the reactivity that's the problem. That takes away that freedom to operate, and it simply reinforces the suffering. This principle in the body and in the mind we call homeostasis, this natural principle of healing, returning to a state of balance and well-being. But it's also, remember, coming out of a much wider context, which is what we see in nature. For example, a fire. What is the whole purpose of a fire? If you make a bonfire and sit around it or whatever, and when you're camping, every fire that's ever happened, ever will happen, has only one purpose in its life, if we can call it that, is to burn itself out, it's to extinguish itself. It's to return to baseline, the state of maximum stability. So this principle is also aligning with the great principles of how the universe actually works. Everything always moves in that direction, unless you pump energy into it, which is what reactivity does. It's like putting fuel on that fire. But if you don't put fuel on the fire has no choice but to burn itself out.
And the same is true with suffering and with stress.
The same exact principle operates with suffering and stress, which is one form of suffering. Same principle operates for anxiety and depression. It's, any form of emotion can be thought of as a fire. It's unstable, basically. It's unstable energy. And that energy will always move to a direction of resolution, healing.
Back to homeostasis. Yeah, it's beautiful. Well, Dr. Peter Strong, I could spend hours going to the depths with you. It's so wonderful to connect again. And let's talk about, for those that are listening and want to learn more, read up about your book, or perhaps because you also do sessions, mindfulness therapy sessions that they can, and you do it through Skype. So anywhere in the world, quite that matter, you can support them. So where can one go to connect with you and be able to learn more?
Well, you can go to my website, which is pdmstrong@wordpress.com, or you could even just Google online mindfulness therapy with Peter Strong, and I'll come up. And you just simply use the contact form, and and then we get started and establish a relationship and schedule a session. And most people, mindfulness is very natural. It's something we already know at some level, these principles. And most people start to see really quite dramatic changes within 3 to 4 sessions. That's what I say on my website. And once you start establishing a practice of mindfulness and mindfulness meditation, then you can start to really develop this in your life, to really develop and cultivate freedom and liberation from suffering, including stress, anxiety, depression, and so on. They all operate in the same basic way. They're all based on reactive, conditioned thoughts and emotions. They're habits. We learn stress, just like everything else. But it can be unlearned when you bring conscious awareness to those habits. And that's the whole point of mindfulness training, mindfulness therapy.
Well, thank you, Dr. Peter Strong. And I will put those in the show notes and all of the sources where we're going to be posting the interview. Thank you for joining us. And remember, everyone, to follow, subscribe, share with your friends, comment. This way you can get all the episodes as they are released. And until next time, go out there and be an all-star.